come chill on the couch with us.
Welcome back to the couch here on Aurora Television around Australia. I get great pleasure meeting politicians on this show, and none so more than this man that's going to be on the show. We've not had him on the show before, but for those people watching around Australia, he is a Labor man. He's also the opposition. Do we call you Minister, Ken?
Shadow Minister, spokesperson.
Tell us your title.
I guess the official title is Shadow Minister for Transport, Finance and the Suburbs.
Ken Travers, welcome to the couch. Now, Ken, tell me, I know what transport does, but I was asked before in the break, someone said to me, can you ask him what the Minister for Suburbs, what do you do in that portfolio?
I guess it's always the question that's often asked. When Mark McGowan became leader, what he realised was that we had a lot of focus on the regions, a lot of things going on in the CBD, but the suburbs, which is where people live, had been forgotten about in terms of the policy outcomes. So providing good sport and recreation, making sure that we're developing communities, looking at how we can build more employment out there in some of those regional town centres like Joondalup or Midland or Rockingham, so that people don't have to travel into the city every day. So it's got a lot of crosses over quite nicely with the transport portfolio.
What a great idea, actually, because you're right, I live in the suburbs, but a lot of the focus is on the city, and it's nice to say that someone's looking after the suburbs as well.
Yeah, and how do we make them work well? You know, how do we create... I'm a great believer that the physical environment also develops the social environment. So how do we make our suburbs better places to live and a greater sense of community within them?
Ken, you've got a fantastic social culture about you. You've been in Parliament now, what, 16 years?
Yeah, and I don't know where the time flew, but it's been a great journey and a privilege.
When did you decide, I want to leave normal life, I want to leave my privacy, leave my family in some cases, and become a politician?
I don't know. It sort of evolved. I fell into I got involved in the Labor Party, and then over time I started to work for some members of Parliament and some fantastic people like Ian Taylor, Senator Chris Evans, and then I guess it just slowly grew, and I thought, well, I want to go that next stage and make that contribution as a representative.
Ken, why did you decide? I mean, this is probably a question people think, oh, well, he's just Labor. Why did you decide Labor over Liberal or National? What made you decide you wanted to be a Labor person?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question, because my parents met as young Conservatives.
Really?
I try and keep that a bit quiet. I've moved them, I've educated them over the years, and they've now come round to the Labor way of thinking. Look, the Labor Party represented what I believe was the better direction for the country. I think Labor has a greater focus on ensuring that everybody has an opportunity in life, and that we also make sure that, as wealthy as a country as we are, that we're ensuring that that people that work hard and do an honest day's work aren't being left behind. And so those are some of the values that are important to me, and I believe are embodied in the Labor Party.
Do you think it's hard in 2012, at the end of it here, to be a Labor person? Is it a tough year for Labor? Not just in the state, but also nationally? Yeah,
look, it's always tough in politics, and it's always, you've got to, there's times where your party's going well, and over the last 12 months, probably federally, we haven't done as well, although I think that is actually changing now, and I think people are starting to see that, Julia Gillard is putting forward a positive agenda for the country. So I think that it has changed. It wasn't always, but the last 12 months hasn't been always the greatest times, but in politics, you've got to take the good with the bad.
Do you ever sit back, because I watch Question Time, and I sit back sometimes, like most public people, and say, oh, dear, what are they doing? There seems to be a lot of slagging going on, a lot of bagging going on, a lot of very nasty politics. Not so much in the state parliament, is there?
No, and I'm really pleased that we don't have that sort of approach in West Australian politics, where it's so negative, it's so personal, and it doesn't talk about the big issues of the country. It's all about very small personal attacks on people. Whereas in Western Australia, I think we actually do talk about the issues, but on both sides of politics, the debate is around policy, and that's where politics should be.
Talking about debate, your passion. What does Ken Travers passionately want to achieve?
Look, I reckon I've got the portfolio that I love, which is transport. It fits it perfectly for me. I was going through some old photos the other day, and I found these photos that I'd taken as a teenager. One was of the Bunbury Port when from the air, just after it had opened. I was up in a plane, an air race I'd been out to, and a whole lot of pictures of trains. And I love cycling, so I reckon put all of those together, transport and changing the way Perth works, getting a transport system that actually adds to how Perth works, because we've got urban sprawl. We can't keep growing and going on the way we've been going for the last 50 years. We've got to plan a new vision for the city, and public transport has to be the key to making that city work, in my view.
Do you think we spend enough on transport in this state? I know there's a bit of politics there, but do you think they do spend enough, the government?
I'm trying to stay positive, but I think Labor governments do. I don't think when the Liberal Party gets in, they spend as much on public transport or transport in total, and so we're often playing catch up, whereas if we got that constant expenditure on transport, I think we can develop a world-class public transport system.
If you could be the minister today and you had unlimited funding, I'll give you unlimited funding, where do you think we need to improve our roads here in WA? Where do we need to spend some money?
Look, I think we've got to finish off the Reid Highway, Tonkin Highway, make sure they're all grade separated, so not only having a north-south freeway system, but a circular freeway system around the outside. But the real answers for Perth are very much got to be around moving towards a public transport system that is an alternative, so that people don't need to use their motor vehicles. So we've got to plan that. And I think we need to be looking at a similar system for rail, a circular rail route going around the city, about 15 k's out. Inside of that, increasing the density, starting to build light rail networks. Beyond that, keeping the city and the suburbs as we know them, and feeding in to a really good rail system, as we've done with the Mandurah line and the Northern Suburbs line.
Talking about light rail, etc. There's something happening in Northern Suburbs. I live in Balga, and there's going to be a new system coming up there.
Well, the government's talking about. They say they've committed to it, but there's no money in the budget yet to construct it.
What exactly have they committed to there?
Well, they're talking about a light rail going to Mirrabooka.
Okay.
Now, I'm still waiting to see the details of that proposal. I'm not sure that that's necessarily the best route for a light rail system in Perth. I think I love light rail and I want to see us develop a light rail system, but I think we've got to do it properly. We've got to make sure we're not having adverse impacts on the other transport networks, and that we're also doing it into areas where you can get the benefits of light rail. Light rail is often about stimulating an increased activity along the corridor. So there's some areas that I think would actually probably suit light rail better than out to Mirrabooka, but I'll wait and see what the government puts forward.
Ken, Alana McTiernan, obviously a former Labor transport minister, did a great job with the line to Mandurah. Do you think we can go a bit further with the line that we've got at the moment, further out?
Absolutely. We've got to extend it further north to Yanchep eventually. We've got to build new lines out to Ellenbrook and out to the airport, and I think they can also become part of that circular rail system that I was talking about, so that if you want to get a lot, like the airport's going to become a major centre for employment.
A lot of traffic too.
A lot of traffic. So what we need to be able to have is that if you live in Joondalup, instead of having going into the city and then out again, be able to get onto a train that takes you directly to the airport via a circle route. So that's my long-term vision, and I guess the challenge will be to find the money to build that as quickly as we can.
Do you give any praise, winding up the year in politics, do you give any praise to the government? I know sometimes it's hard, you're Labor, they're Liberal. Is there anything that you can say, well, we give bipartisan support, they've done a good job with that? I mean, we were talking about the Perth Arena. We think it's a wonderful achievement. Labor started it and the Liberals finished it. Do you support many of the Premier's doings?
Oh, look, I think one of the interesting things is, for instance, legislation that goes through the Parliament, a lot of it goes through on a bipartisan basis. What you only ever see...
You never see it.
Well, you only ever see where the conflict is. And you often will find on committees and the like, members of Parliament work quite closely together. I think some of the, working for the community organisations, making sure that they've got enough funding, disability services. I think there's genuine bipartisan support. I mean, I think one of the things we can be proud of in Western Australia is disability services. We have led the nation.
I hear that.
Both sides of politics have given growth funding into that area. There's always more to be done, and there's always a lot more money you could put into disability services, but we're probably the best state in Australia, and I think both sides of politics can stand up and be very proud of that.
I would have to say you're the cleanest parliament in Australia. You do a lot of work together, and we don't have a lot of sludge over here, and that's the best thing about the parliament we've got in Western Australia. You seem to work very well together, and you only ever see the opposition coming out when they've got a real issue, and they don't just come out and bag for no reason.
No, and that's right. I mean, we've had a pretty tense time around the Peel Health Campus here in Western Australia, and we've been very critical of the government and what's been happening down there. But that's because there is a really solid issue that needs to be fixed, and there's a question and a debate to be had in our state. Do we want places like hospitals privatised?
Exactly. No, we don't.
No, I don't think we do.
And I've had to
either.
use the public hospitals. It's terrible.
Yeah.
We've got great infrastructure, great hospital system. We just need to keep it that way and improve. Ken, we've run out of time. What are you doing for Christmas?
Going to catch up with my partner and her family. She's got 4 kids and a couple of grandchildren, so that's always great.
Chill out or go away over Christmas?
This year we were hoping to go away. We've got a wedding between Christmas and New Year, so we've got to stay in Perth.
And you're looking forward to the election year next year?
Yeah, and we'll be back into it pretty early into January. So just a brief break between Christmas and New Year, and then it's pretty much full run home to the election. And I'm excited about that because I've done everything I think I can do, and just now got to get out there and let the people decide.
Great pleasure to have Ken Travers on the show today. 12 minutes is never enough, Ken, but we would love to have you back on Polywaffle, and you can maybe tell us what's happening in the state parliament or in the state generally.
Yeah, no,
maybe we can get you back. Have a wonderful Christmas. Thank you for being on the couch today. It's been great having you. Ken Travers, everybody, on the couch today. Please thank him.